So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Brady Quinn joins the show. Brady, what's going on, my man? How are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, I finally got on the Joel Klatt show. Some people call it JKS. I'm
Yeah.
just sad it was the week after Josh Payne. I really thought I would be able to get on the show before Josh Payne.
Those of you that don't know, Brady threw some shade out on social media. He was just like, "What to him and Matt? Like, what do we got to do to get an invite?" And so you got the pity invite the next week. Congratulations.
And I took it. So that's how pathetic I am. And for those of you that don't realize this, I've actually worked with Josh Pate. I know Josh well. Great dude. We see him on the road. In fact, we might be seeing him this week, I think,
Yeah,
Joel.
I mean, I
Um,
would assume anyone that travels to games is coming to this game.
you'd hope so. And if they're not, I mean, I'm not really sure what you're doing in college football. So
I agree. I agree. Brady and I are going to be in Ann Arbor for the Michigan Texas game. Before we get to that, and I do want to talk about that in particular, kind of this Michigan possible two quarterback system that we saw against Fresno State in week one. I have to get your thoughts though on your boys. I mean, I was high on Notre Dame in the preseason. I know you were as well, but there was some cautious optimism, in particular with the youthful offensive line. That performance in College Station, I thought was maybe not remarkable, but man, it was impressive what they did. What were your thoughts on that win?
I would just describe that win as the culmination of what has occurred over the past 3 years for Marcus Freeman and his staff. And so I'll start with Marcus. If you have looked at the past couple of years, you really saw the growth in this game as far as how the fourth quarter played out. And I think it speaks volumes to how the game started, his emotion, how he led the team on the field. A lot of those clips are going viral,
Yeah.
and how he's constructed his staff and really everyone. I'm including the strength coach as well. But the bedrock of this team, and he's a defensive minded coach, former defensive player. So you kind of figured that's usually where his bread and butter is going to be, and that's what he's done by getting a guy in Al Golden, who they extended this offseason, making sure they retained him, but he applies a scheme that plays to the personnel. They put so much pressure on opposing quarterbacks with the different coverage looks, blitz looks, pressure looks, fronts, and things that they do. And they're able to do that because they've got Ben Morrison out there. They've got Xavier
Hmm.
Watts. They've got Christian Gray. So it's a combination of, to me, what Marcus has been able to do with his staff, coupled with his recruiting and building it off the foundation he knows on defense.
Yeah,
And then,
and the
go ahead.
surprising part would be on the offensive side because I agree with you that defense, and I think that we would probably say we both expected the defense to play really well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
mean,
I, I said A&M was going to score 9 points. You know, they ended up what 13, so right around there. But the surprising part probably was on the offensive side. You agree?
yes, and then for a number of reasons, but I guess not so much in this sense. Is Notre Dame's got an identity now in offense. Like if I
Hmm.
said to you right now, what is Notre Dame going to recruit, going to develop, and going to pump off into the NFL? You'd probably say offensive line, tight end, and running back right now. Is that fair?
It's totally fair, and that's it. In that order, I would say. Well, maybe O line first, but yeah, tight end, O line, line of scrimmage, and then running backs, and that's exactly what they featured in the second half, and in particular in the fourth quarter.
And I think, for some people who there's always going to be criticism, right? You're the Notre Dame quarterback. There's going to be national attention. There's going to be criticism. And I think there was some concern, like, hey, we all know Riley Leonard's a good athlete. He's a dual threat athlete, but like, what's he going to be like in the passing game? I'm going to take people back. Remember, he missed the spring game. This was the first really true live action, like in a stadium, in an environment like that, with this team, in this offense, with this group. So whatever your preconceived notions were, or your after game thoughts of the passing game is, just pump the brakes. Like, this is week one. Like, I dare you, like, talk to me after week two, talk to me after week three. It's only going to get better from here. I mean, you have a number of transfers too, and Bo Collins, who came from Clemson, Chris Mitchell from South Florida, or excuse me, FIU, but from the South Florida area. You have a bunch of people who are added into this offense that he's still developing chemistry with because of the injury he was coming off of through the spring. And mind you, the offensive line, as we kind of touched on how youthful that group is, and going up against that front. So they leaned heavily on their identity. And I thought the best thing was the way Marcus managed the game. And I think the
Mm.
way, Mike Denbrock, who had been there before, by the way, and really made it a kind of a perfect fit. put together a game plan to allow Riley Leonard to make a big third down throw for a first down and then kind of push and isolate Bo Collins to give him an opportunity to make a big play along with the big running plays. So those are the two things I think when you look at the staff and what he's constructed. And the last thing I'll say is this. Did you see the shot of Connor Wigman throwing up during the game?
Yes. As he's walking, and you can tell he's trying not to, and then it's just like, bleh. Yeah.
So you know this because you're from Colorado, but Notre Dame hired Lauren Landau, who's arguably one of the best strength conditioning coaches I think I've ever been around. I mean, I was around him at the Denver Broncos, even back before he was coaching for the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
But
I was with him in draft prep, like before he was with the Broncos. So he trained me. He trained a lot of the Denver Bronco guys for a long time. He's really good.
He's better than really good. Again, I'd put him up against like Mickey Marotti, who I had back when I was college, who now is at Ohio State. But the general point is this: when it came down to it in the fourth quarter, it wasn't Notre Dame who looked like the team that couldn't handle the heat and humidity and everything else in that environment down in Texas. It was Texas A&M who didn't look like they were in shape, who got leaned on and eventually ended up getting worn on. And so, again, that's a credit to Lauren Landau. But going back to the initial point, it's a credit to Marcus Freeman and the job he's done of constructing all of this entire ecosystem, this program at Notre Dame to be able to display the growth that he's had as a head coach, but the program's had over his tenure so far. So I don't want to make too much of one game, but I thought it was a pretty defining moment for him in particular.
Well, listen, I'm going to make a lot of that game because there's not a lot of tough ones left. And so that's why that game was so important. And obviously it behooves them if A&M goes on and has some success in the SEC. It actually behooves Notre Dame that USC played well against LSU and got a win in week 1. Because now with Florida State falling off the face of the earth, at least they've got kind of this bookend of quality opponents at the beginning of the season, hopefully in A&M, and then at the end of the season in USC. Brady, of all the teams in week 1, Miami looked good. All these teams looked great. You could say Georgia, pencil them in. No. The team that could easily, of anybody, pencil themselves into the 12-team playoff is Notre Dame. You start thinking about that schedule, taking care of your own business. I just don't see them losing more than one game. I don't see it.
I don't either. I said before the season, even back when we thought Texas A&M and Florida State and the challenges those would be, and obviously they got past A&M, but even looking at Florida State right now, which is just seems like a mess, I still felt like the floor was 11-1 with this team. I felt like they've got one of the best defenses in the country. Their offense with Mike Denbrock back and the way he could scheme things up to get the ball to the playmakers, and Riley Leonard, who's a veteran, capable enough of handling all of this. I really felt confident in their ability to, at minimum, go 11-1, if not 12-0. That's how the schedule sets up. So the next step for them is to not get tripped up by the Georgia Techs, the Louisville. So who probably both ranked by the time they play them. I think Georgia Tech's ranked in the AP poll now, and have those games where they stumble, kind of like they did last year versus Louisville, and almost getting beat by Duke. That's the next step is now being able to be the hunted and being able to handle that as they move forward and maintaining that number 5 spot. Because as you said it, this thing sets up very easily for Notre Dame to be hosting a first round playoff game. And I can't wait to see what that environment's going to be like.
There's no doubt. And I was speaking of this earlier in the show before you came on, in terms of Nebraska, this idea that when you're building a program, and Marcus Freeman wasn't building a program, and this goes all the way back to Bobby Bowden, who used to talk about, with a program, you got to lose big before you lose small. You're going to lose small before you win small. You win small before you win big. Maybe that's the maturation we've seen over the last couple of years, that winning small last year is going to turn into winning big. At least that's what Irish fans will hope for. Let's move on to our game. Huge game in Ann Arbor as Michigan takes on Texas. It is a 3-hour edition of Big Noon Kickoff. That's right, 3-hour edition. So 9 a.m. Eastern, the lovely and talented Brady Quinn is going to be gracing your televisions on Fox, and you got to be there because it's going to be a really cool show. It's going to be a huge show as we prep for that game. Now, Big Noon Kickoff, you'll be there. The guys will be there. Charles Woodson will be there. We've got a lot of stuff going on. And then we get to the game. And Brady, I'm watching the film of each of these teams. Texas knows exactly who they are. They know exactly what they want to do and how they want to attack. And then there's Michigan. And you watch that offensive game tape and you're like, okay, they are still in absolute figure it out mode. And that starts with the quarterbacks. They go with Davis Warren, the former walk-on, which, by the way, don't disparage because got to hang with my walk-ons. And then Alex Orji sparingly, by the way, only 2 snaps in the first half. It's not even like they had a real 2-quarterback system, but they were parsing him in there at times. What do you think we're going to see from Michigan offensively?
I wonder if Michigan was holding some stuff back. And the only reason I say that is I'll never forget, and this happens to a fault at times, by the way. It happened to me my sophomore year. We were playing BYU in Provo to open the season. Week 2 was against Michigan. And they were going to be, I believe, a top 10 ranked team at that point in time, maybe even top 5. And our entire training camp towards the end, we had prepared for Michigan. Then we get out to Provo. They're running a 3-3-5 defense. It was tough for our offensive line to adjust, tough for me to adjust. You see the field a lot differently in that case. End up losing, stumble. Now we come back to beat Michigan the next week, but we had kind of prepared and held some stuff back in preparation for that game, thinking we could get by, and we didn't. So that could be sometimes a cautionary tale. And I think that's one of the reasons why when I went back and watched, I thought, this is kind of vanilla. Maybe there's some things too that they didn't want to show that they're going to introduce next week and seeing how Texas adjusts to it. So that was my first thought going back, watching the tape. The other thought was, that this whole 2-quarterback system, I personally have never been a fan of it for this reason, is you're making all 10 players adjust. Everyone else has to adjust besides the quarterback for whoever it is when you're trying to run 2. You either have a guy in there who's, in Davis Warren's case, probably going to run more of a conventional offense from the pocket, et cetera. If Alex Orji is going in, it's probably more run dominant, et cetera. But everyone else has to adjust to their cadence, their leadership, all those intangibles, their pocket presence, the timing with the football, how they're holding on to it, their type of styles of plays you're running, the different football they're throwing too, if you're a receiver or pass catcher. So I've never been a fan of it from that standpoint, is interjecting that into your team. And then in the locker room standpoint is, you and I both know college football and really football in general, there's 2 people that everyone looks to when adversity strikes. It's the head coach and the quarterback. When you got 2, you're naturally creating potential fractions within your locker room when that adversity does strike. And there's not that one voice. It's funny, like we never say that with coaches when adversity strikes. Like the coach has to stand up and say something. And if he doesn't,
right,
they're going to can him and they're going to put someone else in there who will, right? And but for some reason with quarterbacks, we try to make it seem like, oh, this can work, it'll be copacetic. So I've never been a fan of it. I think you have to kind of pick your lane and go with it. And if it's not Davis Warren, if it doesn't work out, then you go to Alex. If it is Alex, go with that. If it doesn't work out, go to Davis Warren. But I've always been a big believer in, like, put the guy out there that you feel like gives you on every single play throughout the game the best chance to win. And we'll see if that happens this week.
And the fascinating part for me is going into watching the film, I'm sitting there and I'm preparing for this 2-quarterback system in my head. I'm like, okay, let's watch these guys play. And, Orji plays 9 snaps total and 2 in the first half. And I was like, oh, wait. This is just a limited package of plays that this guy comes in and runs. Very similar, by the way, to the team that we saw in week 1, and a guy that actually got more than that, in Bo Prabula for Penn State. He came in and did a little bit. Now he played more at the end in kind of mop-up duty, but I do wonder in the back of my head if you can get away with this, if you're internally saying to yourself, Davis Warren is our starter, but we have this other guy that has to get on the field and they play 2 very different roles within the system. Now, your point about everyone else adjusting, all the other players, the 10 on the field, is an excellent point. And that's why, yes, I'm with you. I'm not ultimately a fan, partly because I'm a quarterback and most of us are narcissists. And so we just want to be on the field anyways, right? Like, I know you're laughing a little bit, but like, you just want, like, don't take me off the field.
It's true. I'm laughing because it's true. Yeah, I'm with you.
And so there's obviously a little bit of that going on. When I watch that film, here's what I'll say. When Davis Warren is the quarterback, it reminds me so much of the early Harbaugh teams that Michigan had, 2015, 2016. There's not a lot of dynamic play on the field, but it's serviceable and they wear you down kind of eventually. And you saw that there was a lot of mistakes early in the game. Then they put together a drive late in the game and end up pulling away. I just don't know if a team can beat Texas playing that way. That's what remains to be seen, because I think Texas is an elite team.
Okay, so I think Texas is, but this will be the game that helps me truly believe that they are, because I think this game comes down to two things. For me, we know what Michigan's identity is, and the challenge, and really what this game's all about is Sharon Moore is taking over now for Jim Harbaugh, and it's the question of, can he continue to run this program the way Jim Harbaugh did, where your identity is defense, and on offense, you're going to run the football and you're going to grind them down and you're going to dominate the line of scrimmage, because that's really what's at play here. The only problem with that is if you look at the past 2 years, and so tired of hearing the Connor Stallion stuff, and that's why Michigan had success. So we don't need to go into that. But and one of the reasons why I hate it is because it discredits JJ McCarthy.
That's right.
When JJ McCarthy was called upon, he stepped up and made a play. And that's what we're going to find out about this Michigan team. Because if Sharon Moore wants to run a system very similar and run this program just like Harbaugh did, then he's going to have a quarterback the way they look to be playing right now. One of these two is going to have to step up and be that guy when called upon. He's got to deliver that throw on third down. And he's going to have to deliver that throw in a 2-minute drive and that big play to make something happen, or take off with his legs, make something happen. That's the reality of what won Michigan the national championship last year and took them to the playoff 2 years ago. It was those plays by JJ McCarthy, to me, combined with what they had offensively up front and running the football and that defense. So that's really what I'm curious to see, if Michigan is going to be able to find and execute. And then on the flip side, for me, it's about Texas's defense, in particular, their two defensive tackles,
Yes,
who are now gone to the NFL. Because Michigan's sitting there saying, we know what you want to do. We're just going to make sure we're going to test out and see how good the interior of your defense is. And if you can stop the power, the counters, all the different schemes that we're going to throw your way in the run game without T'Vondre Sweat, without Byron Murphy. And obviously no disrespect to, Texas' opponent last week. It's going to be a different challenge this week when you see Michigan on the field in a real live game scenario, and you have to have those run fits on point and the personnel to do it. And they don't have those game records, I don't believe, now in the interior of their defense. So that's what this game's all about, in my opinion. We're going to find out, to your point, like, is Texas part of that elite conversation of teams we're seeing right now?
And tell you what's fascinating to me is that last year Texas was able to get away with playing in the vein. And this is the last thing I'll say, and then Brady will let you go. And I appreciate you being on, man. I really do. Texas wants, at least their coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski, his history is he wants to be an open middle of the field coverage guy. He wants to have two safeties back, and he doesn't want to give up the big play. A few years ago, it burned him because teams like Oklahoma State could just run the football on him, and they ended up beating Texas. Now, last year, he could do that because he had great defensive tackles. So you can play two safeties back when you've got great defensive tackles. And without those guys, can you really stop the Michigan run game with two safeties back? Because it's against his nature to drop down. Now, he will. I'm not saying that he won't, but I'm just saying like that he wants to keep them back. And if you watch the Fresno State game, there was not a snap of football that Fresno State, at least that I can remember, didn't have run ratios, or at least a guy creeping down, at least looking at the run ratios in order to be the unblocked player in the defensive run front. I'm sure there's a snap here or there where they played too deep, but certainly not something that they were trying to sit in. That, to me, becomes the game. If Texas can sit there and stop the run, then it's going to be lights out for Michigan. But if they've got to drop their safety and get out of what they want to do, then it becomes a much bigger question, because that's when Colston Loveland could get one-on-one coverage and Michigan can potentially throw the ball a little bit. That's what I'll be looking for.
It's interesting that you say that, because I always feel like Pete Kwiatkowski, going back to his days at Washington, right? I thought he played more post-high safety then because of the cornerbacks that they had. They had the Kevin Kings of the world and people like that who they could isolate on islands and be able to put that extra defender down in the box. But a different time, different team, different personnel. And I think, to your point, you hear about, everyone gap integrity. Well, gap and a half is what you can play when you have a T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, where those guys can cheat. And I think one of the things that I'll look to see if Pete Kwiatkowski does is, not that Michigan's going to try to spread you out oftentimes, but when Orji's in, sometimes you might not, you might be surprised if they do try to spread him out to get him a lighter box to run the football. But if they cheat, if they're cheating, whether it's out in the slot with that nickel defender or however they go about cheating with one of the safeties, to be able to have him essentially responsible for a gap, even though he's still trying to play back, for more depth, because they're not concerned about the passing game of Michigan. I mean, right now, no one scares you outside of Cortland Loveland on that Michigan offense as far as creating a big play. And so, again, that's another thing is like, this is a great opportunity for Michigan and for one of those guys to emerge. Otherwise, to your point, it could be a long day. Like Texas could be able to put up some big plays, some big numbers versus this Michigan team.
Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.